Game 1, World Champion Mindhunter versus Joran X. In this game, Joran fought extremely aggressively in response to getting cramped in the center. So I thought this game would be a very good way to start off the discussion about the central domination. Central domination is the best scenario that white can get. There are like 5 scenarios, I guess. The first is where white dominates the center and by doing so closes all of black's plans. The second one is where white does not dominate the center, but he completely controls his sides, so he's safe. The third scenario is where white center and sides are both opened up, but black can't really open up the sides, so impervious defense. The fourth scenario is like white has to allow black to rip open a file. It's unavoidable, in which case he has to resort to a counterattack. And then the final stage is where black can try to win by stalling, just shuffling back and forth. That's like the absolute worst scenario for white to be in. Stubenfish, in a video with Chess Whiz tour around the world or something like that, said that the worst case white can ever be in is where black can just win by simply stalling, because even allowing black to infiltrate a file and allow the queen to take all the pawns gives white better chances. So so games 1 through 10 here are going to be about central domination. And it was hard to find a good game for this, but this one's good because black fights really hard. So white opens up with e5. He wants to play d5 next move. So black responds f6. It does nothing to stop d5. The two main moves here are d6 and e6, both of which cancel out white from playing d5. Otherwise, his center becomes it becomes liquidated, and it's hard to avoid material loss. So this is really good for black. Sure, white can avoid material loss by taking this way and playing e4, but it's just very loosening. So if you are interested in more information about this, I will cover this type of opening from the black side in the second half of the playlist, where I'm discussing black ideas. So, black should play d6 here or e6 here. So he plays f6, allowing white to claim the center with d5. So black does fight for the center by playing e6, but it allows white to close the center with d6 and form a so-called d6 pyramid. This is really good for white because since there's a pawn on d7 that can't move because the d6 pawn is suffocating the d7 pawn, it really restricts the squares for all his pieces. It also makes it extremely hard to remove this pawn on d6 because the queen can't even look at it. So he takes on e5 and then takes on d6. White should take with the c pawn, not the e pawn, because if he takes with the e pawn, then it takes 2 moves to support the d6 pawn, whereas after c takes d6, it takes only 1 move to support the d6 pawn. White's ultimate goal in this position is to preserve the white d6 pawn. So black decides to take with the bishop. You won't see that too often, but if he doesn't take, then he's just dead, because white will just improve the position of all his pawns in a very compact manner, and sooner or later black will probably try to take the pawn and remove it. So he plays b6, so I presume the idea is just to put bishop on b7 so that he can move the queen somewhere on c8, maybe also to play knight c6. Yeah, probably to play bishop b7 and knight c6 so that he can target the pawn with his queen. But in that case, you could do the same by putting the queen on f8. So d4, so natural. Okay, a5, c5. White is not interested in taking, of course. A takes b4, a takes b4. So black tries to open up the queen side. In this position, white decides to take away from the center, I guess to control these two squares away from the queen. So now the queen has no diagonal here. Otherwise, if white takes here, then maybe it can be annoying to give the a5 square to black. I mean, this is much more cramping, I guess. So bishop b7. So yeah, again, white's idea is very simple, just to preserve the pawn on d6. Yeah, so knight c6. So black is just playing in active defense, not worrying too much about material, because if he tries to keep all his material, then he will just get squished. So he will not wait to die. So d4, I guess, to play e5, right? Knight e7, d3, rook f8. So he wants to take 3 times on f5 to liquidate white's king side. So f takes e6 is played. I presume that's because he wants to play e5 without allowing him to, to take the f5 pawn for free. So, yeah, that's what happens. Knight d5. No problem for white. I mean, he just supports the b4 pawn. Take, take. Rook a7. Yeah, I'm not a fan of knight takes d4 here. It's just not necessary. White never really wants to take the knight, otherwise the bishop kind of harasses the a4 pawn. So rook a7, e4, knight takes, a takes, and queen a8. Black has no real threats. The problem is that the pawn on a4 is enough to defend the queen side. So a3, take. So a3 is both to block off the queen from taking the a1 pawn and to guard the b4 pawn. White has like a minor problem here, which is that his b5 pawn is attacked, so he just plays b6. So, yeah, white is just winning. It's just now a matter of conversion. For the king to run all the way to b5 simply allows white to continue to improve his position by pushing the c-pawn with check and then blocking off the diagonal with c2. But it doesn't really matter. The main focus is that white will make a breakthrough on the king's side and win very easily. So not too much more to talk about, but yeah, this is over because these pieces can't defend anything. We can stop here. They played on for a long time because they wanted to like have fun, I guess. So they just made a bunch of queens. Not too important. But what I wanted to discuss is the opening strategy. So the opening strategy for white was to dominate the center. So in the first move, white played e5, so it's the most aggressive approach. You want to try to push d5 so that you are ready to close the center. And white does manage to close the center. And in doing so, it cuts all of black's breathing room so bad that it actually doesn't allow black to even operate on the sides. At least, so in this game, so black tried to operate on the queen side, but he sacrificed some material, and the white pawn on a4 kept everything together. There was just no breakthrough, so it was just completely over. White just won out of the opening. All right, I think that's a good summary. Lessons are, number one, the best scenario that white can be in is to dominate the center. Number two, the pyramid is always good for white unless unless there's no opposing pawn of the spearhead tip. So this is like the spearhead tip, and this is the spearhead. There should be a pawn here for black, otherwise it's not so effective for white. For example, let's just take something like this, I guess, right? This is not so good for white. Okay, he has a pyramid, but there's no opposing pawn on the e-file. Therefore, black can easily undermine the e6 pawn. So that's a very important point. So when you build a pyramid, it should really have an opposing pawn. That way it cuts black off of his squares for his pieces, and sort of serves as an umbrella to protect your pawn. So the d6 pawn here is just very strong. Black was never able to get rid of it. And like I said before, if black doesn't sacrifice material and he just waits, then white will just kill black just by improving his position slowly, because black is without a plan. Black is without a plan because he lost out of the opening. He lost out of the opening because white cramped the center. Yes, he can operate on the sides. He has like 3 pieces that are free to move on the queen side, but since white has full control of the center and the pawns are liquidated on the queen side, which was necessary to open it up, that just means that black can't coordinate his pieces to organize a breakthrough. If white didn't dominate the center, if the pawn were like here and black had his pawn here or something, then he would have some plans that he can try to rip open the center. Like he can undermine the c5 point and try to take it. Also, white had to sacrifice the bishop already. And yeah, all right, I think that covers everything. And I look forward to making the next video. The next video will discuss, I'm not sure if I'm going to discuss another d6 pyramid or maybe just discuss an e6 pyramid. They're pretty much the same, but I guess there's some tiny differences to watch out for. I will think about the next video to present. Thank you, and take care.